Hi, I'm Fred Haney, author of The Fundable Startup. I've worked with hundreds of startup companies and I've tried to consolidate that experience into the fundable startup. One of the fundamental principles of the fundable startup is that um, a fundable startup has two major components. You need a fundable idea and you need a fundable management team. So let's talk for a few minutes right now about a fundable idea. What constitutes a fundable idea? An idea that's so big and exciting and special that venture capitalists or angel investors would want to put money behind it. Well, what are some of the components? I mean, at first, it's really important that your big idea address an important problem. If you're not solving an important problem or solving a problem nobody cares about, then you may have a hard time raising capital for your startup. So question number one is exactly what problem are we solving? How important is that problem? And then dig in a little bit to concepts like what's the economic value of a solution? I mean, how some problems are costing society a lot of money. If you can demonstrate that your problem is costing people a lot of money, then maybe you can justify economically. You can say, well, look, we're going to save the planet billions of dollars every year by providing our solution to the problem. So it's how important is the problem? What's the economic value of the problem and or the solution? How many people experience the problem? If we're talking about diseases, that's pretty easy to calculate. If we're talking about more technical kinds of problems, the kinds of things that high-tech people go after, that's a little harder to sort that out. But somehow part of your description of your idea has to contain an explanation about how many people have the problem, how many people are affected, how many people are lying awake at 2 o'clock in the morning wishing they had your product, and what kind of market size and therefore market potential do we think there might be based on those kind of numbers. So another real important piece of the equation here is how are you solving the problem? You know, what's your idea for solving the problem? And how do we know our solution works? I mean, have we tested it? Can we build the product? Do we know it works? Have we put it in place and used it to solve the problem? Or are we having to simulate or guesstimate, or which is okay, because you can't always have finished product. But somehow you've got to convince investors that you know your solution works, you're confident that it works, and that you'll be able to own the marketplace for your particular product. So here's a mistake you don't want to make in your pitch deck. The worst thing that can happen is you get to slide number 7 in your pitch deck, and one of the partners in the venture capital fund puts his hand up and says, hey, wait a minute, tell me exactly what your company does. I don't understand what your company does. That's just the worst thing, because that means that all 7 of the slides up to now have just been wasted. You know, you haven't sold anything, you haven't convinced anybody, you haven't really described, provided any useful information. So you got to design your pitch deck so that doesn't happen. Well, what does that mean? It means you want to give a accurate, precise, concise definition of exactly what you're doing, what your company's going to do, what your concept is, what your product is, how you're going to operate as early as possible and as concretely as possible. Doesn't have to be the first slide necessarily, but I don't like if I get to slide 3 or 4 and I'm still not sure what the company does. By the time you get to slide 2, maybe 3, the audience ought to have a real clear understanding of exactly what your company's about, exactly what you're doing. Sometimes it helps to have video right up front. or maybe graphics if they're really good graphics. But I've seen a lot of pitch decks where a video in that first or second slide really makes it concrete. So now, as you talk and you describe and you start developing your business plan in more detail, your audience knows exactly what you're talking about, and that's really important. But then remember, the fundable idea is just half the story. We'll talk another time about how you convince your audience that you've got a fundable management team, because that's part of the equation too. So good luck. Go build a successful pitch deck and raise your capital.